All right, everybody, if you want to grab a chair or a seat, or you want to sit on somebody's lap, it's okay, as long as they're okay with it. And we'll get this going. So before we begin, I'll just give everybody full disclosure. I do record this. I got a mic on right now. The reason I record this is not for me. It's for the message, believe it or not. We got on social media kind of by accident. Everything we do is funded by grants with the exception of our salaries, office space, and all the good stuff, which is by the Toronto Police Service. But everything's done by grants. And one of the first grants we did, or we said we're going to have a social media presence. We got so busy doing other things, and I'll explain all this stuff, that was totally on the back burner for us. And as we went to submit our reports for what we're doing with the grants, we jumped onto social media. I put out a few clips, and it wasn't about, the number of followers or who got out to. Really what happened is who started watching. And when I started to look at who was watching the videos, it was different levels of government, strategic advisors, people who can make real change. So by me recording this, I just put out the message enough that people start to pay attention to what's actually happening at the street level. If you take a look right now in this room, there's two things that I want you to note. We don't have any senior officers in this room. Best to my knowledge right now, we don't have any politicians in this room. The reason we did that was one of the feedbacks we had at the very beginning and our first town hall that we did, and this is number 6, was one of the things that they really appreciated, and we didn't do it on purpose. We just wanted to iron out the wrinkles before we bring everybody in. One of the things that they gave back was they really appreciated that this wasn't a photo opportunity and this wasn't a chance for people to push their platforms. Really, our goal and our vision with these type of town halls is to find champions in the communities, to find organizations that are already doing good things, and what can we do rather than as government representatives jump into these spaces and start from ground up. What can we do to find people who are already established, doing good things, that already have trust in a community, already know the issues in the community better than we're ever going to know, and what can we do to build them up, and how can we connect them to people. I know many of you in this room, some of you I met for the first time, and in this one we're going to do it a little different. Because there's an expertise in this room that we don't normally have. We have former gang members, we have former survivors, we have people invested into other initiatives that are really helping on a global scale. And the purpose of this really is to connect everybody to each other and kind of explain what our vision is for the City of Toronto when it comes down to gangs and gangs prevention. So is everybody okay with the camera going and the microphone going? It's just simple, all right? I'll turn it off. We're not going to spend an insane amount of time, maybe 20, 25 minutes on our overview, and then we're going to get to the nitty gritty. The in-depth portion of this, I shut off the camera, I shut off the microphone. I have my notepad here. We're going to keep the tables and chairs the way they are. In other places, we just made everybody put the chairs in a circle, and we have a real conversation. And in that real conversation, I only asked 2 things. So far, all of them have gone amazing. Number 1 is we stay solutions focused. So we're going to learn about the problem on a different lens from the police perspective, as well as what we're seeing on the academic level. And the other part to that is we're going to try to use I statements. The big thing with this, and you'll see with our framework of what we'd like to do and what the gold standard is around the world that we want to do that nobody else has been able to do, is bringing everybody together. That's an incredibly difficult task to do, right? We love the word diversity. It's great, it's amazing, but diversity comes from the word divide. And in this case here, it's to appreciate everybody's differences, but to get over it and to bring us together for the common goal and the common cause. And that common cause is, in this particular conversation, about preventing gang violence, and not just people who are victims of gang crime and those that get manipulated into it, but also how do we stop a kid from the age of 0 to the age of 18 from even getting into that lifestyle and getting involved in any level of criminality, to get them in the criminal justice system, and what can we do to take those same kids that are easily influenced for reasons outside of their control and influence them in other ways to have champions come out of communities. So that being said, my name is Ron Chinzer. I got Jason Kondo over there. Marlon's in the back, Leptise in the back, and we have John Luca, who's a student that helps us out. We're all from the Toronto Police. I'm going to give everybody a chance quickly, because in this room, again, it's a perfect room size for us. We don't need 100 people. We need 20. We need 30. We need real difference makers in here. So that being said, because I know a lot of you, and I think the expertise here is going to be valuable going forward, if you don't mind, we can start over here, and if you can just introduce yourself really quickly, what brought you here, and if you represent an organization or you have a personal tie into something, if you can just highlight what that is. So I'll start with you. Yeah, and we'll give you a little bit in depth now. So you see in the room, everybody's got expertise, so we're going to be able to just fly by this pretty quick, but really get to the framework. And to expand on what Jason said, Where this started was about 3 years ago. For those of you who aren't familiar with the police ranking structure, because I know the titles, they sometimes lose people, right? Even I get lost in some of the titles. So I want you to imagine the chief of police. If we're talking about Walmart, he's equivalent to like the CEO of Walmart. And underneath the CEO of a company is like vice presidents, right? And each vice president might be responsible for different things. So in Walmart, they might have a vice president of marketing, vice president of sales, vice president of whatever. Well, we have 4 vice presidents, and those are called deputy chiefs. And one of the deputy chiefs, his name is Jim Raymer, and he's in charge ultimately of Specialized Operations Command, which includes guns and gangs, our drug squad, our human trafficking, all that kind of stuff on the investigative side. But 3 years ago, he came back to guns and gangs after traveling a little bit, and he got some ideas. Then he came back here and he said, listen, for 15 years, every year we go out and we arrest gang members. That's our job. That's our role in society. But every year that we arrest gang members and we do these massive raids and massive sweeps, that problem doesn't change. In fact, it's getting worse. We can see that by the number of firearms we seize every year, by the number of repeat offenders that we have happen every year, by the number of kids that are getting younger and younger and that are having guns in their hands. So the idea was initially, how do we get kids out of gangs, or how do we get gang members out of gangs? So Jason and I were tasked with figuring out how to do that. And when we jumped into what we didn't want to do was use conventional wisdom, being getting a whole bunch of people together and saying, well, how do we do this? And let's go and do that. We've done a lot of research, which is where we read some of your material. We spent 6 months to a year, and we did research, and we focused on Toronto first, then we expanded out to Canada, then we went to the United States, we went to Europe, and then we went all over the world. And what we realized is nobody has a strategy that works to get a gang member out of a gang. And with that, we understood, okay, well, we're not so special that we're going to be able to come up with something and have it work. But what we did find in the process was there's many things that you could do from the age of 0 to 18 that if you just knew what you were looking for, we'd be able to mitigate it. We'd be able to stop it, or at least put in a protective factor in there. So once we had that, we said, all right, this is where we need to start. Why beat our head against trying to get gang members out of gangs where we're not the experts for that, and we're not the experts for stopping kids from becoming gang members, but at least we can start the conversation, lead it up using our platform as a police agency, being the impact points for gangs in the news, being the beginning of their incarceration and their entry into the legal justice system. Let's at least start this conversation to get other stakeholders involved. And in the course of this, we'll be describing who those stakeholders are. Really for today, I'm going to skip past this because this is a very educated room. You have a handout in there, you can read it, it's referenceable material. The biggest thing in that is our contact information. And I'll tell you why. Jay and I, we run ragged on this every day. We get to work at 5 in the morning. We don't get finished these till, I don't get home till 11 at night. And then from 11 to 1 a.m., my phone is going off with gang members that we have connected with that are need some coaching or some mentoring, or they're in a bad spot and they want to get out. So how we connected with those kids was, Jay and I did a lot of things over the last 3 years. It wasn't just getting out here and doing this. This wasn't the first thing. This is about the 9th project we have running with this. They're all funded by grants and different things. But one of the things that we did at the beginning was we started to reach out, finding gang kids that we knew through police information, developing relationships with them, and then kind of throwing out a fishing line saying, hey, if you want to get out of a gang, let us know. And we developed some solid relationships in that, and we've tried to coach them through. Unfortunately, for a few reasons, we can't broadcast the results. Thanks to conversations like one I had. The one thing we really took from that conversation, which I had with her, and this is the benefit of these conversations, was this is the point of this. As much as we're talking right now, this is just for us to kind of say, this is what we think, but the real education comes back to us through you guys. And what we do is we take that up our chain to all our partner groups and say, hey, FYI, we never knew this. Did you guys know this? And then we really push that to promote organizational change within not just the police, but every other organization that's involved with gang kids. And the conversation was, let's say, for example, we have a kid who came out of a gang 6 months from now. Or we work with him now, he gets out of a gang, which has happened for us, fortunately. And now we want to show this kid as a trophy to everybody and say, look what we did with this kid. Well, framed it in a different way for us, and it was, we don't know what the next 2 years of that kid's looks like. We don't know what the mental health state's going to be. You know, when is depression going to sink in? When is the anxiety going to come to light? And the last thing we want to do is exploit that kid for the sake of having a trophy. So we're dead against it. That's why we're really quiet about what we do. Would we like to be able to tell people and other kids and show them, look, like this is a possibility, you can do this? We had limited to do with it. We just connected people with the right things, of course. but not at the expense of exploiting somebody who's already spent an entire lifetime being exploited. So we don't do that. But when we went back and we started talking to people to figure out how to do this, and we looked at the research, we had to kind of come up with 3 different things. And 3 different things was we really had to be prepped for what our scope is. So one of the first questions we asked the majority of the community members is, what's the purpose of a gang? And generally when we ask that, people throw out different things. They say, well, it's to be loved, they want to be in a connection, they want protection. Those are reasons, but it's not the purpose of a gang. What the purpose of a gang is actually this, academically, right? It's to deal drugs, control territory, and to collect debt. And all of the violence that occurs outside of this has some relation to one of these 3 pillars. And what that did for us is that gave us a very clear scope as to what should we be looking for in terms of behavior. We'd done this in Regent Park, and it was actually perfect because the community there was very active and very engaging. Regent Park is a special place, and I'll explain that later on. It's a very special place. It's a unique part of the city for many reasons, and I'll give you my observations afterwards. So somebody remind me, because I think it's very important. There's a lot of hope there. And when we had it, we had this beautiful bay window, and we were talking about this, and there was kids playing basketball at a park, all right, and hanging out. And I looked at them and I said, okay, this group of kids, are they a gang? And the consensus was, no, they don't really fit that scope. And that was the point of it, is to say, just because we're in a certain area that might have a reputation of gang violence does not mean that every kid playing at a basketball park late at night is a gang member. So for 6 months, Jason and I went and we spoke to 2,000 frontline officers. That was the only thing we did, on top of many other things, to educate them on what should you be looking for. All right, get out of your past experiences and look at what the actual experience is before we start labeling people as gang members, which is a real issue. Right? Imagine this, for those of you who've been in a relationship, if you have a partner who says to you, you know, you went out last night, did you cheat on me? And every time you go back and they tell you, did you cheat on me, did you cheat on me? And you're loyal as they come. How long before you decide to cheat on that person? Because they already think it anyways. He's just smiling, so evil. I don't know which side of the story you're on there. I don't know which side. Well, the same type of thing happens with kids, right? If you pocket kids and they're 13, 12-year-old, 14-year-old, and let's say we have an impact with them and we say this is a gang and they might overhear it. Eventually at some point they're going to adopt some label that's given to them. So very clear we have to define what the scope is of a gang. And the second question we had, especially as a law enforcement agency, when we were given the task to find gang kids or gang members and get them out of a gang, you have 2 things you got to look at, all right? Number 1 is, where do we go? And number 2, what does a gang member look like? Right, those are 2 big issues, right, that we really had to address. And we wanted to take a very academic approach. And we wanted to say, all right, let's get out of our own experiences. Because our own experiences, they're true to us, but they might not be true for everything. Right? And there should be some element of objective identification for what we're doing. So we wanted to get out of subjective opinion. So we said, all right, let's go with objective. So I'll ask you in this room, who joins gangs? And here's the idea, right? With these conversations, this room is a very mature room. All right, and what I like about that is that I feel like we can be open and honest in our feelings and our discussions, and we're not going to judge each other, and we're going to stay solutions focused, and we're going to stay on the track of what can we do to make things better. So without feeling like you're going to offend anybody, just throw out what you think is the type of person who would join a gang. So if we were to, let's start off with a description, right? Describe somebody who, actually let's start off with an area. So if I were to go right now, and the example I love because it's great because it's a pressure example. If I had a magic pill right now, and this magic pill, I said to everybody in this room, listen, guys and girls, this pill, we're going to give this to a kid, a gang member. Doesn't have to be a kid, an adult. And when we give it to this gang member, within 10 minutes of eating this, they're going to become a multimillionaire. They're going to become incredibly smart. They're going to come back to the community they grew up in. They're going to create economic opportunities. They're going to create businesses. They're going to create scholarships. They're going to be a hero in that community. And thousands of kids are going to look to this person and say, man, that could be me. And we're going to impact millions of lives going forward for the rest of the year. And this kid's going to be a success. And they're going to go out in history. There's going to be a statue of this kid. But we got to give him this pill. So number 1, City of Toronto, where do we go? Somebody give me an area. Where are we going to go? We got 1 hour, guys. 59 minutes now. Jane and Finch. All right, so Jane and Finch. Everybody's okay with Jane and Finch? Yeah, everybody's good. Nobody's got an issue. Jane and Finch, we're good. Okay, so Jane and Finch. Now, what does this kid look like? Guys, we now have 50 minutes. The time is running out. I need some descriptions. I got to find this kid. We're going to change his life. See how uncomfortable it is? I love it. This is the most uncomfortable. Yes!
Okay, I do find it uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable.
And the reason I find it uncomfortable is to my true answer Anyone sitting in this room, put them in a certain age bracket. Race doesn't matter, religion doesn't matter. What we have a classification for that, which what we call a demographic mix. We spoke a little bit about it. So simply because we're all from Game and Finch, you know, those three over there may be actual active gang members, and the rest of us, we're victims. But we're not. We wouldn't refer to ourselves as that because we don't want to look weak to them, right? So they sort of lord over the rest of us, and then when police, when you guys come into the area, we are all sort of gang members. So just to break it down simply, my answer is everyone and anyone.
Everyone and anyone, right? And I'll skip to the end piece. You're 100% right. But the reason why we do this exercise is we really get an entire community to come out, and what the description ends up being in 99% of the cases, all right? And the other 1%, I'll give you the other 1%. All right, it's just, I'm laughing because it's hilarious to me, because it's the point of this, right? Is we get the one side of that 1% that's like, they don't want to appear racist, so they give you like the complete opposite, right? So I gave the same scenario, and this one guy says, a 65-year-old white guy on Gerrard Street who's riding a bicycle, he's the guy. And I said, this bill is going to change his life. Are you sure you want to give it to him? And he was like, yes. All right, but 99% of the time, ultimately what that description comes down to is a 13 to 17-year-old black kid who looks apart, talks apart, and might act the part. All right, that's what it comes down to. And the point of that, and why we have this discussion, is to say that's not true at all. Actually, there's no evidence that supports race being as a risk factor in gang involvement. It's much deeper than that. I'll give you a story quickly, and I think it's important, and we used to speed this story up, but the feedback was it's important to tell this story to kind of give you our lens into it and what we had. So again, when we had decided to get out there and touch base with kids and families, and after educating 2,000 frontline cops on these are the stuff to look out for, and the stuff to look out for, what you have in front of you is that laminated card. Those are gang risk factors, and where those came from was in 2007, Public Safety Canada had this publication called Youth Gang Risk Factors. And they looked at gang members from all over the world and found the commonalities. And what they said is, pretty much to sum it up, if you were to have that on a list, the more of those risk factors that you were to check off, the more likely the person is to become a gang member. And if you look at that list and you read it, is there anything there that surprises you? And the most important part in that, in relation to what we just spoke about, nothing there talks about your race, nothing there talks about your sex, it doesn't talk about your gender, your ethnicity. None of that stuff matters, which means nobody's immune to it. Which means it's equal opportunity victimizer. That's what it is. So now we had a way to identify guys, right? We said, okay, perfect, we know how to identify people. And I should bring up the other fact on the location part of it. Why we're in this community right now and why we have 31 of these town halls and why we chose 31 wasn't by choice necessarily. We had to look at a fair way of identifying communities to go into, just as opposed to saying Jane and Finch, which is one of the areas by chance. And what it is the City of Toronto, a couple of years ago, did an equitable score of the entire city. And the equitable score had a lot of different variables, but some of the big ones that people really connect with is the community feeling as if they don't have a voice in the development of their community, having single family homes, having low income homes. So the city got divided into 140 different neighborhoods. Out of those 140, 31 of those were deemed to be low equitable neighborhoods. They're like the poorest of the poor communities within the city. They have the limited support systems that actually work. So what we did is we looked at those 31 neighborhoods, and with police data, we did a bit of an overlap. And if I were to take gang crime and what we know about gangs and where they live, and I were to overlap it with the low equitable neighborhoods, it would almost match up 100%. So now not only do we have a way of objectively identifying kids that might potentially become gang members and really what's happening with them outside of what we may think, but we also knew where to go. So the idea of these 31 town halls was to come in here to really bolster up some sort of voice here, some impact collectively, take it out to different levels of government. And the good news is in 2020, the City of Toronto is dropping in millions of dollars into these areas. But by having this type of conversation, we're gonna be able to take it up and say, this is what the community is saying in terms of real things that's happening from an educated and mature level. This isn't 8-year-old kids coming in there saying we don't have Wi-Fi for our Nintendo Switch. It's people who said, I've lived it, I live here, I serve people that live here, these are the issues and this is how we feel about things. And the feelings is very important because when we analyze feelings a little bit more with some of the community members, they come from real events. And those real events are just miscommunications. And the reality to it, it's the miscommunication And some of them, in most cases, is not on the community end. And I'm trying to phrase that in a way to be fair. But really, it's organizations serving the community, right? There's a big disconnect sometimes in how service is provided, where service is provided. And one of the best quotes we had from our Regent Park one was, "We are not under-serviced, we're poorly serviced." And we're finding that to be a theme everywhere. I'll give you an example. For the 2019 gang prevention town halls, on August 7th and August 26th, I sent 91 emails out to community organizations that we identified in each of these platforms, in each of these communities. Out of the 91 organizations, the whole point of these initially was to have them here, to have them have booths up here, to learn about the risk factors involved in some communities, and just connect community member to agency without any police involvement. Hey, you can, we don't even have to know. If you guys see value in this, and we were gonna have all these agencies come up and talk about what they do and how they can help. Out of the 91, how many do you think responded? 7.
10.
7. 7 respond, right? Which supports the idea of we're not under-serviced, we're poorly serviced. So I'll give back to this kid, right? So we educate these frontline coppers within a week of educating them on these risk factors that we have to say, hey, if you're out on patrol and you know a kid or you come across a kid or come across a family and you see this happening, now that we've kind of give you a heads up as to what to look out for socially and psychologically, hey, let us know and let us run through a couple test cases. So within a week, we had an officer who was very sharp, very turned on. He said, have a good relationship with this kid. He hits everything that you have. And we ended up connecting with this kid. And when we connect with this kid, we also connect with his mom. So anybody under age 18, we always include the parents. It's the right thing to do. So we connect with the mom and no dad that we've connected with has been against us trying to help. All right, and we're not experts at this. We're still figuring it out, and really quickly realize we might be in over our head, and that's where we leverage community experts and psychologists and youth workers, and that's where we really try to connect kids to these specialists. We just use our ability of having a conversation to do it. But this kid, we meet him, and we talk to him, and I'm gonna paint his life story, and if I'm wrong in any part of it or it doesn't make sense to any of you, by all means let me know. But so far when I've done this, it's been pretty uniform along the way, and I'll paint the picture for you. So this kid is one of 5 kids. He's the middle kid, all right? His mom is 25 years old by the time the youngest is born. She's a single mother. She lives in community housing. These kids share one bedroom, and sometimes the kids come and sleep with her in her bedroom. Or sometimes. Now this kid at the age of 3, he has, in the risk factor categories on that card, family is the first one to pop up. And at the age of 3, the most obvious sign is behavioral problems at home. And I'm not talking about the 3-year-old who won't eat his peanut butter sandwich or won't pick up after himself. I'm talking about that 3-year-old who punches the walls and hits things and is a terror and is just really a standout kid for poor behavior. That's at the age of 3. And I want you to think about this kid that we're dealing with in particular. His mom says, yeah, at 3, he would just do naughty things. And I want you to think here, for those of us who have kids or have had kids or have ever babysat kids, when you're washing your dishes and you can hear the kids, everything's okay, right? What happens when you're washing the dishes and you don't hear anything? We know something is up, right? So quietly we shut off the tap, we listen some more, we sneak over, and boom, we kick in the door, and boom, I got you. So this kid very early on starts to realize that, hey, out of 5 kids, the way I get mom's attention is I got to do something bad. And from the ages of 0 to 7, our brains operate at what's called the theta wave, and it's almost a state of hypnosis. And in that state, we're not taking in information to teach us how to succeed in this world. What we're taking in at that age of 0 to 7, all of us, is how do I survive? What are the skills I need to survive in this world? So this kid's already developing, right? He's already developing those pathways in his brain that this type of behavior, and he doesn't do it on purpose. He's 3, he's a little baby. He just realized when I do naughty things, that's when mom comes in and talks to me. So at the age of 6 now, we get to the school risk factor category. And in school, he's in kindergarten. And the biggest indicator in kindergarten is school failure. Right? I know we say a lot of times, listen, kids don't fail school in Toronto. It's Canada. Everybody passes. Everybody gets pushed through. There's high school graduates who still can't read and write. How crazy is that? But in this case here, this 6-year-old kid gets to school, and yeah, while he may pass, there's a big difference between passing and succeeding. And generally speaking, let's go into the school environment. The same 3-year-old, now he's 6 years old. What type of behavior does he exhibit in the schoolroom? Is it one that where he mingles with everybody and all of a sudden how he's at home is different to how he is at school, or is it the same? Who's the replacement for mom in a school? A teacher. Right? And teachers teachers are like angels to me. All right, I love teachers. They changed my life. I think they're absolute angels to me because they dedicate their life to improving people. And they try their best, right? They got 30 kids to deal with. And teachers take this kid, and what they do is they bring him to the side. Okay, here, you play here. Here's a special thing for you. And this kid gets isolated again. All right, so now we have, at the age of 3, he's naughty. At the age of 6, he's failing school and causing disruptions in school. He gets isolated and left alone. At the age of 9, I remember for me, when I was 9, my parents just said, hey, be home before the streetlights came on, right? And I'd be out there. But look at me, I have a 9-year-old right now. And my daughter can't go anywhere without me in war paint hiding in the bush. Okay, you can't even check the mail. If you want to go play with your friends at the bus stop, I'm right there watching you, just listening quietly. But it's Toronto. It's a big city. It's a different place. Is it not uncommon in community housing to see a 9-year-old playing by themselves, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old playing by themselves? I see it all the time. I've been a cop here for 13 years. Jay's been a cop for 950 years. We see it all the time. And it's normal to do, especially in community housing. And with this particular kid, mom says when he was 8 or 9, I just thought what he needed to do was he needed to dump his energy. This kid has too much energy. So I said, get out there, go make friends, dump energy. And now this kid he's in the wild. The same kid goes out there and he already has these behaviors, right? 3 years old naughty, 6-year-old naughty. Now he's 8 and he's on his own. And he gets out into the wild. And when he's out in the wild, does he find kids like him or less like him? Like him. So now for the first time in this kid's life, he goes, oh my God, I found somebody like me. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. There's another one. And then something happens between 9 and 15. Right? That's a big time. That's a big growth period. Mentally, physically, there's a lot going on. Hormones change. But in this kid, with our police records, and based on what his mom tells us and he tells us in the conversation, at 8 years old, his mom manages to get him a bicycle. Amazing day for this kid, right? Gets him a bicycle, gives it to him. He goes out, but he's not in the best neighborhood, so what happens is a week into it, his bike gets stolen, and he comes back home. And I want you to imagine this, all right? You're that mom. You got 5 kids. This kid's been a pain in your ass for 9 years. You managed to get him a bicycle. He goes out and he comes home and he says, Mom, somebody stole my bike. What does mom say to that kid? What would you say? Hey, and don't give me the answer because you want to look like a super parent. What would you actually say?
I'll say, what did you ask, kid? Where did you put the bike? How the bike get stolen? Did you see who did? The bike?
Yes.
Something like that.
Blame the kid.
Yeah.
You don't want to
Yeah.
blame the kid, but
My dad would have slapped me out. I wouldn't even finish my sentence. The bike is going, bam, right? In front of my friends. He would have done it on purpose. Well, mom says to this kid, you idiot, you had one job, it was to take care of this bike. You can't even do that right? So the kid takes off. They call the police. Hey, this is the city of Toronto. There's about 15 million bicycles here. You can report your bike stolen to us. We're going to put it on the system, but unless we come across it by accident, you're probably not going to get your bike back. That's the truth to it. So now they call the police for a stolen bike. It means a lot to this kid, but to us, it's a stolen bike. There's shootings, there's murders, there's homicides. So it's a stolen bike. We do our job. We put in the report. We go off, right? There's no bicycle prevention task force. It's just a stolen bike. Now at the age of 9, mom manages to get this kid another bike. Same thing happens. Comes back home, tells mom, gets another whack. This is twice you did it. You're not getting a bike again. Police get called again. We have the report. Can't find the bike. 10, there's nothing. All of a sudden at 11, mom calls the police and says he hasn't come home. He's missing. We take the report. He's an 11-year-old. We manage to, as we're taking the report, he manages to come home a little bit later than regular. Okay, the street lights were on. He came home a couple hours later. And when he comes home, we're there. And what do we do as police officers? Where were you? Are you okay? And the kid's 11. So he says, I was around the corner with my friends. Okay, don't do that again. Tell your mom. Then at 12, he goes missing again. And this time when we show up, he doesn't come back home later on. But we know where to go because we have a police report. He said, I was around the corner with my friends. And what do? We go around the corner and there he is with his friends. And then as police officers, we want to know who his friends are. To say, hey, if he goes missing again, we need to know who you are so we can call your house and find out to find this kid because now he's done it twice. So we get all their friends, and now what we've done is we've collected a network for this kid. Now we know who this kid's connected to, right? And then at age 13, he goes missing. This time, he doesn't come home. We check the area, he's not there anymore. A week passes, he manages to come home. Then he comes home, and from 13, 14, and 15, now you have serious violent crime. You have robberies, extortion, assault with a weapon, shootings. Now this kid starts jacking up on the criminal side of things. And by the time we get to him, he was 15 years old. We had broken down his risk factors. We literally have a sheet that we go through, and we realized, oh man, this guy's got a lot of issues. We're going to try to help him. But we lost this kid. I don't mean he died. What I'm saying is we lost the motivation from this kid to work with us because he went back to the wild. All right, our 30 minutes of influence that we had on him, the 30 minutes of influence we had with him and his mom, we're not with him the other 100 hours of the week. He just goes right back to where he went to, and since then we've discontinued any work with him, not by choice. He just does not want to talk to us. And in that conversation, I'll tell you this, he does tell us how he got recruited into a gang, and it was simple stuff, which you'll be able to expand on that further. But he says at the age of 12 is when he got recruited in, and I'll ask you here, how old do you think the person was who recruited him into the gang? He was 16. So the 16-year-old recruited this 12-year-old into a gang. We have kids recruiting kids into gangs. And when we looked at the 16-year-old who recruited him, he was a suspect in a murder. So there's some serious violence there. And when we looked at this, a couple things happened. One, when we lost the kid, we decided to go and talk to his mom. You know, say, hey, like, where did we go wrong? Like, what could we have done better? And the mom doesn't even know. Right? She's trying her best, man. She is trying her best. She doesn't even know what to do. And what we decided with the mom, we said, let's do your risk factors. Let's check it out. And she had more risk factors from the kid. So the question became, what's happening here? Oh my God, we totally missed this whole thing about the family dynamic. We focused so much on the kid, we didn't see the pillar in the household. We might not have that influence for the rest of the week, but mom's always at home. Mom's the center of the house. Once we realized she had more risk factors than the kids, our focus became on how do we strengthen the mom so that the other 4 kids in the household have a reduced chance of joining the gang lifestyle, and then that one kid who's kind of on the fence about things might have some support system at home. And that might sound crazy that the mom has more than the kid, but I'll put it to you this way. When I look at my life, sometimes I think I have a hard life, right? I'll come into work sometimes and my coffee will have, actually Jason thinks he has a hard life. I'll give you this example. Yesterday I came into work and there was a coffee on my desk, right? And it says a medium 2 milk. And he has a disgusted look and he goes, that's for you. I go, what is this for? He's like, oh, my day is ruined because it's supposed to be 2 milk, but it's actually cream in there. And he has had a horrible day the whole day, all right, because he had cream in his coffee. So we think we have a hard day with this, and that ruins my life. But then I thought about it when it came down to this mom, and I thought, all right, I get it. But then I look at my parents' life. Now, my parents' life was hard. That was a difficult life. They immigrated to a country. They didn't even speak the language. They faced a boatload of racism at the time. They struggled through. They worked factory jobs. Their education didn't mean shit. But they did it. And I'm better off than they were. And then I look at my kids, and they're spoiled as they can be. I give them everything so much, and then I yell at them for being spoiled, but I did it. Right? God, why are you so spoiled? Meanwhile, I'm the one buying them the stuff. And the point of that story is it's supposed to get easier. And it's the same thing with this gang kid and his mom. This kid is much better off than the mom. The mom, actually, she's trying her best, and it might not be good enough, but she wants help as well. So when we realized all that, we said, oh man, there's something here. And the last risk factor, in the individual category in the risk factor card, this is where at the age of 15, in our case here with this kid, and this kid is one of a whole bunch that we've dealt with. How are you, brother? Just grab a seat anywhere. Yeah. But in this case here, with this kid here, at the age of 15, the most obvious risk factor that pops up, the most obvious sign is when they're a self-admitted gang member. This kid was a self-admitted gang member. We asked him, are you part of a gang? He said, yes, I am. Not only that, he lifted up his shirt. He had the t-shirt of the gang underneath. He was already showing us where he's going to get his tattoo. He showed us his social media on his own. And he goes, yeah, this is who I rep. Because he belonged to that, right? He had a really desire to it. But that's the most obvious. So at the age of 3, child delinquency at home. Poor behavior at home. At the age of 6, failing school. At the age of 9, you're going to see this word delinquency. Has anybody heard that word before, child delinquency? I'll ask you this. I'll frame it for you this way. When there is a kid who's 9 years old and he goes to school and he pushes somebody and he takes their lunch money, or he pushes them and he takes their Nintendo Switch or whatever, what do we call that in school? Bullying. You know what it's called if you're over the age of 12? Robbery. Right? So now 3, poor behavior. 6, failing school. 9, delinquency, being crime under the age of 12. And then 15, you have self-admitted gang member. Now here becomes the big issue, and this is where we are today. At the age of 18, it becomes a community risk factor. Right, this is the age 18. We're now in the media. What you see on the front page is this: Toronto gang violence. What are we going to do about it? Now it's an election time. And what are all the leaders talking about? This is my stance on gun and gang violence. And what do they say? Give me some of the stuff that they say. Ban guns. You know what? I cut myself with a pair of scissors yesterday. We got to ban scissors. Based off of that story, and I'm not an expert by any means. I'm just telling you, we've been invested into this for 3 years. I've never claimed to be an expert, but I'm knowledgeable on the subject. I have some life experience with it as well. And I would really question that. If it was that simple of a problem, we'd have a solution. And this goes back to this. I want you to take a little, there's risk factor cards there, and anybody here who's good at math. We have 5 categories of risks and 36 risk factors, but we're gonna work with a real easy number. All right, so they told us at the beginning, they said, guys, figure out how to get kids out of gangs, all right, or figure this out. Get a gang member out of a gang, figure it out. Come back to us with a program. Those 5 risk factor categories, if they were balls and they were different colored balls, red, black, brown, blue, orange. And I said to you here in this room, how many different combinations of 5 different balls can we make? What is the number? I'll tell you, 3,125. She remembered it from yesterday. She would. So if we have one problem where they say, guys, come up with a solution for this, and we identified 5 categories of deeper problems, and if I had one solution to 3,125 different programs, I wouldn't be a cop. You'd see me on Oprah. I'd be selling books. I'd have my program. I'd be a consultant. I'd be living in Barbados on a beach somewhere. That's what I'd do. But there is not one solution. Now let's look at the 36 risk factors. That same scenario. 36 different color balls. How many combinations? I'll just tell you the number. It's 150 unvigatillion, which is the number 150 with 69 zeros after it. And each of those risk factors can be expanded again, and expanded again, and expanded again. The point of it is we had to work with a workable number. We didn't want this to seem so overwhelming. And 36 of those risk factors over the course of 0 to 18, which we've just outlined a life in the kid, which has been mimicked many times over, thousands of times over in the city of Toronto. How many spots or how many people are impacted or organizations are impacted from the age of 0 to 18? So let's just talk about the people that were impacted by it. And this kind of came to light from a model that we took from the United States, which we really liked. And what that model is, it's called the comprehensive gang model. And what it says is to really combat and prevent gang crime and gang membership, you need to first identify and incorporate every stakeholder that's impacted. It's not just the police responsibility. All right, at the age of 18, 100% when you have serious violent crime that goes on in the neighborhood, when you have daytime shootings, when you have kids being shot in a park, a pregnant lady getting killed in a drive-by, that's 100% a police issue. That's a massive community issue, and that's what we're here for. We're here to find those people who do that and to hold them accountable for what they do. That's the role of the police. But everything else from the age of 0 to 18, right? Where is that kid? Let's just say, where does that kid live in this case here, the age of 0? Community housing? Are they impacted by it? 100%. What about the family? Are they impacted by it? For sure they're impacted by it. So they're stakeholders. And then that kid becomes 6, and where do they go? School? School is impacted by it. And then they go out there and they're in the community, and what's in a community sometimes? You have other residents, so you have a community that's impacted, but you also have businesses that are impacted. I'll ask you this right now. We talked about Jane and Finch, and we'll just use that as an example. Is there a Starbucks in Jane and Finch for everybody who's familiar with that area? No, there's a Starbucks, right? Why is there not a Starbucks there? Is there an income there that can support a $5 Frappuccino, or I don't know what it is? I don't even, it's too expensive for me, unless Jason is buying, then we go to. And I don't even look at the drink, I look at the right side of the price. And I'll take that one. I'm allergic, I don't care, I will take 2 of those, 1 to go. Right? I'll tell you why, and this is a very important point I make here. When we look at the real impacts of gangs in communities and we look at things like that, one of the number 1 issues is social disorganization, and that's a theory from the 1940s, and what that outlines really is that, yeah, people make choices, but environments impact a lot what choices people make. It's a real thing. And the reason I like using Starbucks as an example, it's so simple, it's a coffee shop, they're everywhere. But I'll ask you, for those kids in those neighborhoods who live in those neighborhoods, and again, I worked in guns and gangs for a long time, I worked in different units for a long time, I'd done community programs with kids in gang environments, I'd coached kids, I've done a whole bunch of stuff with gang kids my whole life without even realizing these are gang kids. It's just, I gravitated towards it. And I'll ask you that, in those neighborhoods, when I had those guys, they don't even know that a block over is a whole other place, right? They don't even see that opportunity out there. So when we have these expectations of kids in these neighborhoods that grow up in that environment, the expectation is, hey, get an education and get a good job. What are their options? If you can't even see a simple thing like a Starbucks, and why Starbucks is a good example is, look, it's a massive corporation, they pay for school, they pay well, they have an organization that you can move up in, you can franchise it if you learn how to operate it. So there's an immediate opportunity that you can physically see. Meanwhile, we go into their school and said, you can be a doctor. They haven't even gone to a doctor. So if they physically don't see it, what is the likelihood that they're going to believe that they can do it? And the fact that when we talk about what impacts it has, the other part too with that is who invests into a gang area? Like what business says, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna put a Starbucks into Jane and Finch? What's the rationale? I remember I brought this up to high school students. So I deal with one program where it's really gifted high school students in gang environments. And it's run by somebody else who's an amazing guy, and he just brings me in to have this little chat with him. And when I bring up the Starbucks example, they all say, when I say, why wouldn't we put a Starbucks into Jane and Finch? They say, because it would get robbed. Right? They even know. And the crazy thing about kids, and this is a bigger thing, is only in Toronto and major cities, I see this happening, but Toronto specifically, if you were to ask me, hey, where do I live? I'm gonna give you an address or a city that I live in, right? When you ask kids in Toronto, what do they say? Ask a kid, any kid walking in Toronto. Let's say we got a kid right here walking around, right? And we say, man, hey, where do you live? What does he tell you? What block he's from. And those blocks are gang associated, right? Sometimes, a lot of times, right? So if you get a kid here and you say, where are you from? He says, I'm from Falstaff. What's the association of Falstaff? You get a kid who's in, York University Heights now, quote unquote. Where are you from? Jane and Finch. Get a kid in Rexdale, where are you from? Jamestown. They don't even say, it's just, that's not a thing for them because they're so connected to the label associated to it and the impacts of gang violence. So the impacts of gangs are massive. And you look at businesses impacted, schools are impacted, we're impacted, courts are impacted. There's so many impact groups and stakeholders that Jay and I have spent the last 3 years, besides all these mini projects, the other 2 hours of the day that we sleep and have free time, we're connecting with these stakeholders to have buy-in to say, hey, listen, we can all have points where we can mitigate these risk factors at a very early age so that we don't even wait till it gets to 18. 36 is a very difficult number to deal with. 7 is easy. 7 we can do. 7, when we have that kid from 0 to 7, if we can identify these issues popping up, they're they're easily influenced, they're still operating in the subconscious way, we can totally take advantage of this and we can help curb that behavior. With us, a bigger strategy is exactly what we're doing here, and we're almost to the wrap up here, and we're gonna get to the nitty gritty and the really good part of it. But for us, we have 4 pillars in our gang prevention strategy that we really wanna stick with outside of these stakeholders' involvement. The first one is education. It's kind of what we're doing now. It's us being knee deep in the research, connecting with community members and selling the message. And the other part to that is education is two-way for us. That whole second part of this, that's for us, it's not for you. It's for us to moderate a conversation to learn what are the things we don't know. And before we get there, I'm gonna give you an example of a couple things that have been really impactful for us that I think will highlight and kind of gear that second conversation. But that's the education part, really staying on top of things. What's happening, what's working, how do we implement it here, and where are the areas that we can improve. The second part is prevention. Exactly what we're doing here. How can we identify young kids and young families that need supports where they need it so that this doesn't even become a problem? A lot of that has to be with getting involved in schools and communities, identifying local leaders, giving them the resources and strengths to be able to do that in ways we can't do it. For us to come in right off of the bat as a police officer, I have to spend 90% of my time developing trust. That's a waste of time for me, man. I don't need to do that. It's okay, I understand. We're not gonna change that. You might like me, but you don't like the Toronto Police. That's an issue, right? So with us, we said, okay, why would we waste 90% of our time when we don't have time to develop trust when we already have people who have 100% trust already? Let's find those people who have the trust and let's figure out what we can do to help them deliver services that are better. The intervention piece, and you bring up a great piece, and this is a piece that gets overlooked everywhere. And for us, this is one of the areas that we really want to focus on as law enforcement. We talk so much about prevention. Even you go to your doctor, we got to prevent disease, right? And 100% is important. Prevent diabetes, prevent cancer, prevent high blood pressure. What about everybody who already has it? Right? In this case here, the real issue that we're having is when we see gang members that recommit crimes, and being part of a gang means you almost have a 70% increased chance of reoffending. That's just the way it goes. So if we have this pocket of kids, I'll say, or young adults, which for me, honestly, if you're under the age of 21, I consider you a kid. Right, because that's what the numbers are saying. An 18-year-old, you don't know anything. I hate to tell you, you don't know anything. When I look back when I was 18, I was stupid, right? Me, I know right now this is how I know I'm not stupid right now, is because I realize how stupid I am. Does that make sense? I realize how much I don't know. Back then I thought I knew everything. So anyways, we got these kids, and we have all these kids that have been incarcerated in the system, and what happens in jail is they become stronger, they become smarter, they come out, they have new networks. Opportunities get limited. When you have a criminal record, how hard is it to get a job? How hard is it to bounce back from that? How hard is it to beat that label? And all these kids, while we focus so much on prevention, these guys in the middle that reoffend and do other things, sometimes it's not by a choice, it's just this is who they are. We can't neglect that. So for us, it's identifying where can we assist with that. And then the last part is suppression. And what that suppression is as law enforcement, the number one way to combat gang violence is to arrest the people committing the gang violence. But it's not everybody. I'll break it down for you. We work on a 90-10 rule, and that's what we're looking to really change in our organization as well as everybody else that we deal with. There was a study done of a gang in Los Angeles, 300 gang members, and what they realized was 90% of that gang, or 270 people, had an average gang membership of 2 years. They were in and out of the gang within 2 years. Generally, by the age of 21, they were out of the gang. And when they had left for personal reasons. Either they were a victim of a crime, somebody got shot and killed that they knew, they were shot, they got into university or school, their parents moved, something happened, they found a girlfriend or boyfriend and they left. And in all of the cases that they studied, none of them faced any repercussion for leaving. In fact, they were encouraged by other gang members to leave. Other gang members said, man, you got a life in front of you, go and do it. And they left on their own. There was no outside influence, they did it on their own. But the other 10%, the other 30 gang members were responsible for the everyday criminal decision-making activities. That 10% was responsible for 100% of the gang crime. So yeah, the other 90% might have participated, but it was at the direction of the 10%. So for us as law enforcement, it's that 10% that we want to rope into. The other 90%, our real goal is to shrink that 2 years to down to 18 months. Let's shrink it down to 12 months. Let's shrink it down to 3 months. We can work with it. We can't stop that right now, confidently. I can't say we can stop it. We don't. We're still figuring this out. But 100% I can tell you that we're trying to change our organization to say, if you do arrest a group of kids, if you can identify who that 90% is, maybe charging them isn't the best thing to do right now. Maybe not having them enter the legal justice system is the best thing. Let's figure out other things. But at the same time, if we identify the 10%, that's who we got to focus on, because that's the 16-year-old recruiting the 12-year-old. And yeah, that person needs help, but that person needs help at the intervention level. We got to put them in a place in their life when they have 24-hour supervision, and that we can really take the choice away from them to start looking at rehabilitative programs on the mental health side or opportunity side. Those are our pillars. We'll skip past the stakeholders because we already talked about it. What I will tell you in Toronto, these are all the organizations we've already touched base with that we're looking to grow partnerships with. And the whole point of these partnerships is not to develop an intelligence gathering tool, and I want to make that very clear. This is not, for us, for myself, Jason, and Marlon, anybody else who works with us here, our number one thing is this is not an intelligence gathering operation. We're not in this to identify gang members. I'll tell you right now, this week alone, I'm dealing with 5 gang members that have expressed an interest in getting out because I do school assemblies. I don't know any of their names. It's all done through instant messaging. It's all done through social media. It's all done through text messages from, I know, fake phone numbers. I never asked their name. I don't need to know your name. Your name has nothing to do with how you ended up in a gang. What I need to know is, what issues are you facing? What risk factors do you have? Give me a rough area that you live in. That's all I need to know. And I can coach you through this. And what I'll do is I'll connect those people. I'll say, hey, call up Ronell, call up Liz. I'll never ask you who called you up. I'll never ask you about that. I don't want to know what happened. That's up to you guys. All we're trying to do is take our platform, our ability to have conversations in an isolated environment, to have influence, to connect them with people who can serve them better. But for us to do this on this massive scale, we need to have a few things done organizationally, which is agreeing to what information are we going to share, why are we going to share it. But I promise you here, as long as Jason and I are attached to it, 100% we're going to be confidential with it. This is not an intelligence gathering tool. This is a tool to prevent kids from getting into there. I'll finish off with this slide before the next one. So this was one we added in yesterday because at some meetings that we have, and unfortunately with some board of directors or other influences of all these other areas, what's the number one thing they want to know is how much is this going to cost? What do you want from us? What is the cost? And this is the number I give you. These are the cost of these crimes in 2014 Canadian currency. So murder costs that much. All right, and this is a conservative estimate. I purposely chose the lowest number I could find. There's some other numbers that said a homicide costs $12 million, but I didn't want to go with that. I wanted to take the lowest number I could find because the lowest number is still unbelievable to me, right? And I don't want to put a number associated to the loss of life, but here's the importance of this. Here's the importance of it. If any organization says to me, hey man, we can invest into this and we can justify it. Let's say it costs $1 million to get this thing going off the ground. Let's just say $1 million, fair number. You don't need a lot of people, you need the right people. $1 million to get this off, even $2 million, and we prevent one homicide. We have a $3 million return. That's one homicide. Now I'll ask you here, what could we do with that $3 million? Yesterday I met a guy at our town hall last night. His name is, and he actually emailed us back today. And this guy's incredible. And this is the whole purpose of the second part of this. This guy on his own, no funding from anybody, He mentors 125 kids in his area, 7 of which graduated university. $0 and 0 cents. He did it with an idea, he did it with a thought, and he did it with commitment. If I could give that guy $3 million to say, what you've been doing works, how do we grow you? How do we make more of you? That's what I want to put it into. So while we have some net savings here, the big economic impact is, listen, man, we prevent 1 homicide. We got more money to divvy into places that actually need it by growing and identifying leaders. And I'll tell you, the conversation was so impactful yesterday that around midnight, believe it or not, we managed to have conversations to help change policies at the government level to allow us to start accepting money at some point. I'll tell you why that's important. Anybody who's been in the grant space before, you write a grant, you got to wait 6 months for that money to come in. That money's next to impossible to spend once you get it in. Well, with us, we're meeting with people like Omar yesterday, who says, listen, I'm running out of money to pay for this. I wish I can give you money. But with us, companies have reached out to us and said, hey, we want to donate, we want to sponsor. As a government agency, I can't take it. I wish I could connect point A to point B, but they can't get a donation receipt. So these companies, they have no obligation, but they want to help out, but they want a receipt for the tax benefits. We've started enough of a conversation internally that at some level it's going to get brought up to say, can we figure something out where we can get money in and money out? $1 in, $1 out from private business out to people who need it, like Omar. That being said, if you are on social media, I'm there, I'm at Toronto Cop. I do put up clips of this, and I'll tell you that the clips are not for me. I don't care. Honestly, it's so much work for me, but I don't care. What I do care about is our message and getting this thing off of the ground. And really, you can do high-level stuff, but they change. Here, from ground up, this is a powerhouse group. When you have a collective voice, I promise you there's going to be some change, but we really need to all be on the same page. These 31 town halls are ideas to collect everybody at some point together, and at that point, we're going to have the 31 lowest and most impacted neighborhoods together with a common voice at the end of it. So I'm there. What I'll ask you now is stay where you are. We'll take 2 minutes, take a quick break, or 5 minutes, grab something to eat, grab some samosas if there's any left, come back, and we're going to have the open, honest discussion. And in that discussion, we'll go over the rules really quick with it. There's only 2. And then I'll tell you the kind of what we're looking for, and then you guys can fill in the blanks. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate you hanging out in that, and then we'll move on from there. So thank you guys. Take 5 minutes.